The neighborhood was tranquil that Monday morning. Sunlight spilled across perfectly trimmed hedges, manicured lawns, and driveways so spotless they looked like showroom floors. At least, that's how the homeowners association wanted it to be. But one house stood out, not because it was messy or neglected, but because it was different. A two-story brick home with a tall oak tree shading the front porch. Its grass wasn't golf course perfect, but it was healthy and green. The flower beds weren't designer arrangements, but bloomed with colors that gave the street life. There was a basketball hoop near the driveway, scuffed from late-night games. To most neighbors, it looked like a happy, lived-in family home. To the hoe board, though, it looked like a problem. That morning, a white SUV pulled up to the curb. On the side was a cheap magnetic decal that read Hoe Enforcement Division in bold letters. Two men stepped out, both wearing black polo shirts with fake patches stitched on the sleeves. They strapped utility belts around their waists, flashlights, radios, even handcuffs. To the untrained eye, they looked like police officers. But they weren't. They were fake Hoe police hired by the board to intimidate homeowners. And today, their target was Marcus Johnson. Marcus was in his kitchen, sipping black coffee and reviewing a folder of documents across the table. His eyes scanned each page carefully, as if every word carried weight. He wasn't wearing a suit or a badge that morning, just sweatpants and a plain gray t-shirt. To anyone else, he looked like an ordinary man enjoying his day off. Then came the knock. It wasn't polite. It wasn't casual. It was the kind of knock that demanded obedience. Heavy fists slamming against wood, echoing through the house. Marcus sighed, set down his mug, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, he saw two men in black with badges that didn't look quite right. He knew precisely who they were. Still, he opened the door calmly. "Morning," one of the men said, his tone sharp and authoritative. "Are you Marcus Johnson?" "Yes," Marcus replied evenly. "You're in violation of multiple Hoe codes. Overgrown vegetation, unauthorized basketball equipment, and improper yard presentation. We're here to serve you an eviction notice." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Eviction notice? From the Hoe?" "That's correct," the second man said, holding up a yellow slip of paper. "You've ignored repeated fines. The board has authorized us to remove you from the property today." Marcus took the paper and looked it over. The letterhead was a bad photocopy of the HOA's logo. The language was vague, full of threats, but no absolute legal references. "Interesting," Marcus said, folding the paper neatly. "And what authority do you gentlemen have to evict me from my own home?" The first man smirked. "We're the Hoe police. We have the authority to enforce community standards." Marcus chuckled, not in fear, but in amusement. Curtains shifted across the street. Neighbors peeked through blinds, whispering to each other. Everyone in the subdivision had seen these so-called enforcers before. Most people didn't dare question them. That was how the Hoe maintained control, through fear. But Marcus wasn't like the others. The taller enforcer stepped closer. "Pack your things. You're done here. If you resist, we'll have you arrested." Marcus tilted his head. "Arrested? By who? You?" The man's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to homeowners pushing back. Most people folded the moment they saw the handcuffs. "You don't want to test us," the man growled. But Marcus only smiled. Marcus Johnson wasn't just any homeowner. To his neighbors, he was a quiet family man who had moved in a few years ago. He kept to himself, waved politely, and never caused trouble. Some people assumed he was a mid-level manager or maybe a retired serviceman. But Marcus had a history far deeper than anyone could guess. He was one of the FBI's most effective field agents for 15 years. He specialized in organized crime and racketeering, which meant he'd spent years dismantling fake organizations, extortion rings, and criminal enterprises built on intimidation. To put it simply, Marcus had spent his career locking up men like those on his porch. He had chosen this neighborhood intentionally. The Hoe was known for shady dealings, and Marcus had already been quietly gathering evidence, bank records, fake invoices, Harassment complaints point to something much bigger than power-hungry neighbors. The eviction notice wasn't a surprise. It was the next move in their desperate game. And Marcus was ready. Listen carefully. The first enforcer barked. "You can leave peacefully, or we can make this difficult." Marcus crossed his arms. "Make it difficult, huh? You planning to drag me out of my house?" The second man stepped forward, resting a hand on the baton at his belt. "If we have to." The neighborhood air grew tense. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. But Marcus wasn't intimidated. He leaned against the doorframe casually. "Tell me something," he said. "How much does the board pay you to play dress up? Because those patches on your sleeves, they're not official. And this notice? Worthless in court." The men exchanged glances. For the first time, their confidence faltered. Marcus continued, his voice calm but cutting. "See, the problem with pretending to be law enforcement is that sometimes you run into someone who actually knows the law, and you've just knocked on the wrong door." The taller man sneered. "You think you're smart, huh? We'll see how smart you are when you're out on the street." Marcus smiled faintly. "We'll see." The enforcers retreated a step, frustrated by Marcus's calmness. They weren't used to resistance. Usually, their presence alone was enough to break people down. But Marcus Johnson wasn't just another homeowner. As he closed the door behind them, Marcus walked back to his kitchen, picked up his coffee, and dialed a number on his phone. "Yeah," he said when the line connected. "It's starting. They've escalated to fake evictions. Bring the team in closer. We'll move soon." He hung up, eyes sharp with determination. The fake HOA police thought they were predators, but they had just entered the territory of the most feared FBI agent in the region, and Marcus was about to show them what real enforcement looked like. The next morning, the SUV returned. This time, there were 3 fake HOA officers. Word had spread that Marcus Johnson was trouble. They weren't coming to deliver papers today. They were coming to make a scene. At 9 a.m. sharp, the men stormed up his walkway. Their radios crackled, their boots hit the pavement in perfect rhythm. To the neighbors watching from behind curtains, it looked like a SWAT raid. One of them pounded on the door. "Marcus Johnson, open up immediately." Marcus was already waiting in the living room. He'd been expecting this. Slowly, he set down his newspaper, stood, and opened the door. "Back again?" he said calmly. The leader of the group shoved a folder toward him. "Final warning. You are in violation of Article 14, Section 2, and multiple HOA codes. You are hereby ordered to vacate this property immediately." Marcus glanced at the folder, then back at the men. "You brought reinforcements this time. Guess I rattled you yesterday." The man's jaw clenched. "This is your last chance to comply. Failure will result in forcible removal." The neighbors gasped audibly from across the street. Words like forcible removal carried weight. Marcus didn't flinch. "Tell me something," he said, voice steady. "Do you honestly believe you have the authority to drag me out of my own house?" One of the younger enforcers smirked. "We've done it before. Folks usually fold. You're the only one dumb enough to resist." Marcus's expression hardened. "That's because I know my rights. And I know the law. What you're doing isn't enforcement. It's impersonation. A crime." The leader leaned in. "You think you can scare us with big words? We own this neighborhood." Marcus's lips curved into the faintest smile. "That's funny, because technically I own it." The enforcers laughed. "You own it? Please. You can barely keep up with your yard." Marcus stepped aside, motioning them toward the driveway. "Come, let me show you something." Reluctantly, the men followed him outside. He pointed toward a black SUV parked discreetly down the street. Its tinted windows reflected the morning sun. "You see that vehicle?" Marcus asked. "Inside are agents who've been watching this neighborhood for weeks. They're documenting everything you do." The enforcers scoffed, but unease flickered in their eyes. "And this?" Marcus pulled a small folder from under his arm. He flipped it open, revealing property records stamped with official seals. "These are the deeds to half the homes in this subdivision. Foreclosures seized through federal cases. I bought them legally. So when you say you own this neighborhood, No, I do. The fake HO cops froze. For the first time, they didn't look confident. The leader recovered quickly. You're bluffing. No way you own all that. Marcus stepped closer, his voice low but cutting. Do you know what RICO stands for? Racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations. I've used it to take down entire crime families. Compared to them, you're amateurs. The men exchanged nervous glances. You've been extorting homeowners with fake fines, fake police uniforms, and fake authority, Marcus continued. That ends today. The youngest one muttered. He's full of it. Just scare tactics. Marcus pulled something from his back pocket. It wasn't a gun. It wasn't a weapon. It was a badge. The gold FBA shield gleamed in the sunlight. The neighborhood collectively gasped. Curtains flew open. Phones were raised. People were recording now. Marcus's voice carried, calm but commanding. Marcus Johnson, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of. Marcus's voice carried, calm but commanding. Marcus Johnson, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Organized Crime Division. The words hit like thunder. The leader's smug smile faded instantly. The younger enforcer's face went pale. Even the neighbors peeking out from windows now stood openly on their porches, whispering to each other in shock. You're FBA? One of the fake officers stammered. Marcus held his badge steady, letting the sunlight reflect off the gold shield. That's right. And I've been investigating this HO for months. He stepped closer. Every fake ticket, every harassment, every dollar you scammed out of innocent families, it's all been documented. I know exactly how you've been laundering money through shell accounts. I know about the intimidation tactics. And I know about this little act you call the HO police. The leader's voice cracked, but he tried to sound firm. You can't prove anything. Marcus gave a low chuckle. Can't I? You're standing here in fake uniforms, carrying handcuffs you bought online, trying to perform an unlawful eviction. You just incriminated yourselves on camera. He pointed casually at the neighbors with phones raised. Evidence everywhere. Word spread quickly. More residents poured out onto lawns, whispering, recording, watching history unfold. For years, they had suffered under the HOA's iron grip. They'd paid bogus fines for flowers that weren't approved colors. They'd been threatened with eviction over mailbox heights and fence paint. And nobody ever fought back, until now. And to everyone's shock, the quiet man who lived in the brick house wasn't just anyone. He was the FBI agent investigating the entire scam. One elderly neighbor stepped forward, voice trembling but strong. I knew it. I told everyone they weren't real police. They bullied me into paying for repairs I never needed. Another shouted from across the street. They fined me for parking in my own driveway. What kind of law is that? The crowd grew louder, angrier. The fake HO officers shifted uneasily. Their power was slipping through their fingers. The leader tried to regain control. He raised his voice above the crowd. Everyone calm down. This man is lying to you. He's just trying to scare us with fake credentials. He's not FBI. Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled a small radio from his pocket and pressed a button. Unit 2 confirm, he said. A crisp voice came through instantly. This is Unit 2. Visual confirmation of badge and target. Backup en route. The crowd gasped again. This wasn't a bluff. The fake officers looked toward the black SUV at the corner. The doors opened, and two men in suits stepped out, walking briskly toward the scene. Their movements were sharp, professional, unmistakable. The HO enforcers began to panic. You see, Marcus continued, calm but commanding. This neighborhood isn't just a community. It's a crime scene. You've been laundering millions through fraudulent HO fees. You thought nobody would question you. But you made one mistake. He stepped forward, eyes locked on the leader. You chose the wrong man's house. The leader's mouth opened, but no words came out. You thought I was just another homeowner. Just another target for your scam. But I've spent 15 years taking down operations far bigger and more dangerous than yours. Mafia families, international cartels, corrupt corporations, and now Marcus gestured toward the men in suits approaching. You! The two real agents arrived, flashing their badges for the crowd. One of them pulled out a folder. Warrants, he announced loudly, holding the documents high. Signed by a federal judge. We've got everything we need to shut this down. The crowd erupted in cheers. Some neighbors clapped, others shouted angrily at the fake officers. You stole our money. You threatened my kids. You ruined this neighborhood. The fake HOA police backed up, their swagger gone. The youngest one muttered under his breath, "We should go." But Marcus shook his head. "Oh no, nobody's leaving. Not today." He pointed at the leader. "You're done. All of you. You thought you were untouchable, but the law just came knocking on your door." The leader's bravado collapsed. His hands trembled. This isn't how it was supposed to go." Marcus's voice was ice cold. "It never is." As the federal agents moved in, sirens wailed in the distance. Police cruisers sped toward the neighborhood, lights flashing. Neighbors flooded the streets, no longer hiding behind blinds. They shouted, they recorded, they cried tears of relief. Marcus stood tall in the middle, his calm gaze on the fake officers. The HOA's reign of fear was over for the first time in years. But Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The arrests today would shake the neighborhood, but the deeper conspiracy, the money trail, the corruption at higher levels, was still waiting to be exposed. And Marcus Johnson wasn't about to stop until every puzzle piece fell into place. He looked at the leader one last time. "Next time you think about playing police," Marcus said, his voice low but clear, "remember what happens when you cross the real thing." The crowd roared. The sirens grew louder, and the HOA empire began to crumble. The flashing red and blue lights bathed the street as police cruisers pulled in behind the federal SUVs. Uniformed officers jumped out, weapons holstered but ready, forming a secure perimeter. The three fake HOA cops froze like deer in headlights. Their phony bravado had melted away. Sweat beaded down their foreheads as the neighbors swarmed closer, their phones raised, voices louder than sirens. "Arrest them! About time! They ruined this whole place." The leader of the fake cops tried one last desperate move. He raised his hands, stammering, "This is a misunderstanding. We were just following orders from the HOA board." Marcus folded his arms. His voice carried through the chaos with an authority that silenced the crowd. "You weren't following orders. You were running an illegal enterprise. Intimidation, extortion, impersonating officers. Those aren't HOA policies. Those are federal crimes." One of the FBI agents stepped forward, cuffs in hand. "On your knees, hands behind your head." The enforcers hesitated. They looked at the crowd, the agents, and Marcus's steady gaze. Then, finally, the leader dropped to his knees, hands raised in surrender. Click! The sound of handcuffs echoed louder than the crowd's cheers. One by one, the fake HOA officers were restrained, their fake badges ripped from their shirts, their radios and batons tossed aside like toys. The neighbors shouted words of relief, some even crying. Years of pent-up anger spilled out all at once. Marcus, however, didn't celebrate. He stayed calm and collected, his sharp eyes focused on the bigger picture. Because he knew the board itself was next. An older woman, Mrs. Green, pushed through the crowd. She'd lived in the neighborhood for 20 years, her back bent but her spirit unbroken. She raised a trembling finger toward the large white colonial house at the end of the street. "That's where they meet. The board. They sit there and count the money they steal from us." The crowd roared in agreement. Marcus nodded. "Thank you, ma'am." He turned to his fellow agents. "You have the warrants. Execute them." The agents marched down the street, police officers following. Within minutes, they stormed the colonial house. Shouts, footsteps, and doors slamming blended into a storm of justice. Moments later, the entire HOA board was led out in handcuffs, 4 men and 2 women, all in expensive suits, their faces pale with defeat. The neighborhood erupted. Cheering, clapping, voices shouting. Finally, justice. No more fake cops. For the first time in years, The residents felt free. Later that evening, Marcus stood on his porch as the sun dipped low. Reporters had already arrived, cameras flashing, microphones shoved forward. "Agent Johnson, can you confirm the HOA was running a criminal racket? Were the fake officers armed? How long have you been investigating this neighborhood?" Marcus spoke carefully, each word measured. "What we uncovered today was a fraudulent operation disguised as community management. These individuals exploited residents through illegal fines, intimidation, and impersonation of law enforcement." "That ends now." The reporters scribbled furiously. Neighbors stood behind him, nodding, supporting him. Then Marcus added something that made the crowd gasp. "As part of ongoing federal investigations, multiple properties owned by the HOA have been seized. Many of those properties now legally belong to me." Which means, in a very real sense, he paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I own this block." The neighborhood fell silent, then erupted into applause. Weeks later, the case went to trial. Inside the courtroom, the former HOA board members sat hunched at the defense table, their once proud faces now pale and drawn. The fake HOA cops were seated behind them, shackled, looking far less intimidating in prison jumpsuits. The prosecutor laid out the case: fraudulent fines, extortion, impersonation, racketeering. Marcus's testimony was precise, powerful, and unshakable. When the defense tried to argue that the enforcers were just following HOA bylaws, Marcus leaned forward, his voice cold. "HOA bylaws do not authorize impersonating police, threatening families, or stealing homes. What they did wasn't management. It was organized crime." The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts. The sentences were harsh: years in federal prison for the enforcers, decades for the board members. Their assets were seized, their reputations destroyed. But the neighborhood? It came alive again. The fear that had once gripped every street corner vanished overnight. Kids played basketball at Marcus's hoop without worry. Neighbors painted their fences whatever colors they liked. Families gathered